EBI delivering? And I suppose for those of us outside of Ireland, really the question is, how do we make the most genetic progress we can? And I don't know, is there anything more topical, or do people get more passionate about than cow type? And actually, you've seen me, maybe some of you have seen me hobbling around here today, but actually there's nothing wrong with my leg, but if things get heated, I just think this might be handy to have close to me, especially seeing as the table is away from us now, we've nowhere to hide. So I'm sure we'll have a very good session. So yeah, with that, I'll welcome Professor Donagh Berry to the floor. Donagh is the Director of Vista Milk, a new research institute that sits within Teagasc Moorpark. Yeah, one of the most scientifically published people in terms of genetic merit of dairy and beef cattle globally, and has contributed a huge amount to the industry previously. So really delighted to have you here today, Donagh. I'll hand over to you, and then we'll have the panel session.
Great stuff. Thanks, Paddy, and thanks to Positive Farmers for inviting me as well. So I'm going to cover two things today. Do I just click down, is it? Oh yeah, sorry. So I'm going to cover two things. The first one is, does the EBI work? So that's going to be the first part of the story. And then the second part is the room for improvement. I know we're after lunch, so if you are feeling a little bit sleepy, the answer to both is yes. So you can go to sleep. But look, follow me on this journey anyway. So just starting off with the first one, does the EBI work? And I can unequivocally say that no index in the world has been scrutinized scientifically as much as the EBI. Fact, right? And there's three different ways that you can test things, or test indexes. You can look at the national data, and that's some of the work that Siobhan Ring recently did. Then you can look at herd level data and profit. So I think there's around one other study that I can find in the world that has done the one on the left, top left. Then there's only two studies, one in Australia, one in America, that has looked at actual profit. And then the bottom one is some of Frank Buckley's work from the next generation herd, which we've been working on for the past 20 years. Again, okay, it wasn't completely EBI, but it was based on different strains. Right? What's the summary from all of these? Well, as for every 1 unit increase in EBI, profit, so net margin, is increasing by around €2 per lactation. Right. And even recently, we're doing a Ballyhaise Open Day in 2 weeks, so we pulled out some data for that border region. It was exactly the same thing. And we still do this every now and again, every few years, and we're seeing consistently the same story. From all the other studies, what we're seeing is that the achievement of profit is through greater milk solids yield, longer lactation, greater reproductive performance, all materializing in greater longevity. Okay? Some of the most recent stuff, particularly Siobhan's work of the national database, has shown that in herds that are super for fertility, the benefit of improving genetically improving fertility is not to the same extent, or we're not realising the same gains. And Frank Buckley is seeing something possibly similar from the next generation herd at the moment, is that genetically the two groups seem to be coming together, and phenotypically the two groups seem to be coming together. So that's why I've highlighted it in red. This is work of active research, and it's something I'm going to come back to at the very end when we talk about where the improvements are likely to be. So yes, the fertility evaluations, they're still working, but they're only working kind of half as good as what we would expect them to work when the herd is really good for fertility, which kind of makes sense. When you're already really good, it's hard to get to that extra level. But we can see nationally we're going in that route. So looking at the rate of genetic gain, I'm sure you've seen many of these slides before. So we can see in orange there is our rate of genetic gain in EBI. I've highlighted there where our national herd is, and also where our top 10% of herds are. So we can see that that's increasing linearly. Now, an obvious question from the audience is, can we keep going up like that? I've been asked that question for the past 10 years, right? The answer is not changing. We're still gone up from 10 years ago, and we can still increase linearly, and to do it in a kind of a holistic approach. Also, if we look at the milk subindex and the fertility subindex, they're the yellow and the blue lines, we can see that this is coming from a combination of both fertility and milk, which isn't always what we hear. We hear a lot of the improvement is due to fertility, but that's not what the data is telling us. And I'm going to revert to this a lot throughout the presentation. I'm a data scientist, so rather than listening to hearsay, I like to look at what the data is actually telling me. So with that, what I've been hearing for the past while is that these genomic bulls are falling out of the sky, right? Just so people are aware and put at ease, there is a technical advisory group to the ICBF, of which I sit on, but there's also some other international experts, and we look at the system as a whole. Within that, we can look at individual bulls, but every single time we look at it, there does not appear to be any systematic issues with the genomic evaluation system. Yes, some bulls drop and some bulls increase. Of course, nobody ever rings me when telling me about the bull that increases. They always tell me about the bull that drops. Look, it is difficult, and I'm going to do it, despite the fact that it is difficult to do it, it is difficult to compare across time. Like, you have the economic values in the EBI changes across time. We changed the base. So back in 2016, all your cows dropped 71 euros, right? Also, we have a model change. So we changed the statistical model in the 50 or so traits that we're evaluating. The real recent one was the test day model for milk production, where we changed to a standard lactation curve per animal to actually allowing the curves to change for individual, and that caused re-rankings. Despite all that, what I have done is I was storing all the evaluations from the year 2014. I went back to the year 2014 and I broke the animals, the males, into 3 groups. One, they were genomic bulls. That's actually should be just genomic bulls. I have genomic AI bulls separately, but they were genomic bulls sold in 2014, so they had no progeny. They were just genotyped. Then there was non-genotyped bulls in 2014, still had no progeny. They're probably just stock bulls. And then there were bulls that were already proven in 2014. And I followed them through the next 7 years, and I only retained those animals that had, I think it was over 100 progeny in 2022. Right? I only did this for production. Again, I'm looking more at the system than the individual traits. Question that often comes up again is that, are we selecting very aggressively for EBI? What I'm showing you here in the 2 distributions is the blue is the average EBI of male animals born in the year 2021, and in red are those selected from the AI SARS, or by the AI companies. So what you can see, as you would expect, as you would like to see, is that the AI stations are aggressively going after EBI. Right? So they are at the very right of the distribution. So let's anyway go back and look at the analysis. What has happened? Just looking at protein yield, again I can show you the same for fat and milk yield. What has happened to those genomic proofs since they started, or since you bought them in the year 2014? What I've heard is that they have dropped, and yes, they actually have dropped. They have dropped from around 11 kilos of milk to around 7 kilos of milk. So if you multiply that by an economic value of around 6, around 36 euros. And that's what people see, and that's what people tell me about, and that's what irritates people. However, if I was to look at these proven bulls in black, or if I was to look at non-genotyped bulls, I see exactly the same trend. And then if I actually go back through all the presentations I've been given for the past 10 years, and I realize, well, there was a base change in 2016, so that caused all bulls to drop, all cows, every single animal in the country, to drop 5.2 kilos of protein, dropped 71 euros in total. And then there was a test day model change in around 2017. So in reality, because proven bulls are by definition proven, the real analysis to do is actually to compare the movement of these 2 groups of genotyped animals to the proven bulls. So when we do that, we see that they are relatively stable. Yes, the genomic bulls do drop slightly, but it's not to the great extent of what sometimes we're often led to believe. And yes, there are individual bulls inside there that do plummet. In fact, the movement in the genomic bulls is over twice as large as the movement in the proven bulls. But that shouldn't be any surprise to anybody, because genomic bulls are not proven bulls. Proven bulls are proven bulls, so they're not going to move as much. So again, it goes back to what's the data telling us versus what we actually hear. And the data is telling us something, well, it's telling me something very different to what I have been hearing. So to conclude on this, and even though I say the EBI, the same is true for the dairy beef index, the terminal indexes and the sheep indexes. No indexes in the world are scrutinised as much as our indexes, by ourselves scrutinising our own work. Consistently, it's demonstrating that higher EBI animals are more profitable. Recent work by Ben Lahart and Lawrence and Co. in Moorpark have shown also that they're more carbon efficient. The cow of today is 14% more carbon efficient than what it was 20 years ago. They're also more efficient in nitrogen use efficiency. So these animals, there is an indirect benefit from an environmental perspective also. However, it's been constantly questioned and probed, and let's be clear, we welcome that. I've highlighted some of the deficiencies that have already been raised with us, that we've seen ourselves. We want to be probed, and hopefully we're going to get a good bit of questioning going on today as well, so that we can come back and re-look at it. And with that, of course, there is plenty of room for improvement. Like, the EBI is never going to be spot on, like no index in the world. The other thing that we need to differentiate, of course, is when people tell me in discussion groups that the EBI doesn't work. And you're what? And then when you dig into it, it's not really the EBI, it's the system around it. Right? So there's a huge system, obviously, around data collection, the genetic or the genomic evaluations, what the commercial companies do, how they select their bulls, how do we disseminate that out to the national herd, sex semen or other methods, and also the herd breeding schemes. Again, I'd hear a lot about this from a dairy beef perspective. I built a dairy beef sire advice, but I was told, well, it's still matching bad bulls with bad cows, but that's because it's the decision of the farmers on what bulls they actually put into the system. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the first half of the talk. The second and longer part of the talk is what can we do better. Now, I'm going to get a little bit technical, because I think it is important to distill things down. If there is an issue or a concern with the EBI, where is it? Right? So if we look at the EBI, like any index, it's made up of three things. It's made up of a value. Right? I'm going to go through each of these individually. It's made up of how often do we express this particular trait. So you can only kill an animal once, so you only express that once, but you can milk a cow for 4.5 lactations, so you get the genes expressed 4.5 times more often. Then there's the prediction of the genetic merit. You can see I've put in economic in brackets and I put genetic in brackets because with the cow index it's the same principle, but it's just not based on genetics, it's based on additional factors. And then we have that, I have number 1, trait number 2, and I have trait number n. So there's multiple different traits inside there. So let's start off with the first one. What does an economic value mean? Well, it's quite simple. It's the change in profit per unit change in that trait. So the economic value on protein yield at the moment, I think, is €5.88. So if your cows produce 1 kilo more protein, that is worth, in profit terms, €5.88 to the average farmer, whoever the average farmer is. Some people it's worth more, some people it's worth less. If milk price goes up, there's an intuition that, you should put more emphasis on, or milk price goes down, you should put more emphasis on milk to try to recoup that profit lost. Well, actually, the value you get for selling more protein is less. So the weight and emphasis, or the weight in milk production, actually reduces. So these economic values, they're futuristic. Don't forget, the EBI, when we launched it in the year 2001, was based on the A plus B minus C milk pricing system, which didn't come in for 6 to 7 years afterwards. So I pose to you the same thing as kind of linked to the next one is, what's the story with carbon? We currently, and there is no immediate sense that we're going to benefit from a carbon efficiency perspective, but what's it going to be in 6 to 7 years' time? Once the bulls that are picked up in the last few months reach puberty, produce semen, go into a cow for gestation, the cow has 2 years then to, or the calf has 2 years to grow to become a cow. That's the timeline that we're actually thinking about. And I think I can't remember who said in the last one, we're foolish to predict, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to predict the future economic scenario. Heretofore, it's called the economic breeding index. Maybe something we have to discuss. There's the issue of calf welfare and ethics was brought up earlier on. Maybe we need to think about, should it be called some other sort of a breeding index, but may not necessarily be monetary based. I'm going to show you a few slides later on to just show you how robust the index is to the different assumptions. It's amazingly robust. So we can start changing prices, and it doesn't really change the rankings of stuff. The other important point is that the sign does not necessarily imply the direction. So we have a negative value on milk kgs, we have a negative value on cow size, we have a positive value on conformation. We're not going down in milk, we're not going down in cow size, and we're not going up in carcass conformation, right? Because there's so much other stuff at play, not least the selection decisions used by the sire analysts. It's a scary thought, but actually the bulls that you use from an AI perspective are dictated by only a handful of people. They're the ones that dictate which bulls we buy. So with that, of course, I got the narrative, the AI stations are picking all the heavy bulls. They're picking all the high-yielding bulls, so let's look at the data. So what I'm showing you here in blue, on the left-hand side, is the maintenance sub-index of all the calves born in the year, all dairy calves born in the year 2021. And in red are the ones that became AI sires. There's no difference. There's half a kilo of a difference between them. So no, The data is telling us that the AI stations are not selecting heavier bulls to go into AI. Let's look at it from a milk perspective. Apparently, they're selecting all the high milk kg bulls. Well, the data on the blue is showing us that that's the population of males and females born in Ireland in the year 2021. In red are the ones that were picked up by AI stations. Yes, they're slightly increasing. I think it's something like 10 kilos more on milk. Okay? So let's look at the actual data to what it tells us as opposed to what we think is actually happening. There's no consideration of risk inside in this. And of course, Lawrence and Mike Murphy talked about this at the start of the session, the risk that we just don't know about. We hear a lot about this thing called co-design, especially when it comes to technology, designing with our end users. And in a way, that's what we're doing here today, is we're co-designing what's the issues with the EBI, how can we make it better? Now let's get back and see if we can actually do it. And the point I already raised was about the fact that there is no cognizance of things with a non-monetary value. Maybe there should. But I would just want to move on to the correlations and the stability of the EBI. What I'm showing you here, and many of you will have seen this slide before, this is how the EBI has evolved over the past 20 years. Blue is the emphasis on milk production, and red is the emphasis on fertility. And we got a fair amount of stick for the first few years about, the EBI is changing, massive bulls are flying all over the place, which never just settled down. So what I did yesterday was I looked at the rankings of bulls. I took the bulls available today, and I produced an EBI for those bulls for every single year for the past few years. I was actually surprised by the results. What we see with the RBI, that was the old relative breeding index, that had a correlation of 0.6. So there was a fair amount of re-ranking of bulls between the RBI and the EBI. The first year of the EBI, with the EBI today, correlation of around 0.95. So a fair little bit of re-ranking. But for the last 15 to 17 years, the correlation has been around 0.99. So with all these changes in economic values, this is just due to changes in economic values and not due to changes in models and trait definitions, just due to changes of the assumptions. Quotas are gone. Remember before we had cows limiting, or our output was a limiting factor. In 2007, we changed it to land being the limiting factor. It really didn't affect the economic values or the rankings of individual bulls. Let's take it a step further. This is work that Lawrence did. We looked at, well, is our EBI robust to the future that we don't know what the future is? So what happens if there's a quote on cow numbers, on emissions, on organic N? What if feed prices go up? What if feed prices and milk go up? What actually happens? The correlation between the bulls, the rankings of the bulls, is 98% the same. They're more or less identical. So the point I'm trying to get across, this is just showing you the scatter of it, is the EBI, as it stands, is unbelievably robust to what is coming down the line. Unbelievably robust. I'm showing you here, this is the worst case scenario. This is the current EBI, and this is the EBI where if we were to fix cow numbers. The correlation there is 0.98. There is a little bit of re-ranking, especially if we look probably at the very first, for the top 100 bulls, but they're not really changing all that massively, right? So no matter what our assumptions are, or how wrong we get them in the future, which we inevitably will, we can never predict milk price 6 years down the line, our system, our indexes are still amazingly robust to that. The other one, so that's the value. The next one is the expressions, right? So what's the frequency of how we express this trait, be it milk production or beef or calving difficulty, and when do you express it? Right, so we know with inflation. So we include an inflation rate here of 7%. So a euro today is worth 51 euro or 51 cent in 10 years' time. So I'm sure you well know when a cow meets a bull, they produce a calf, right? And 52% of those calves are males. And the vast majority, Robert excluded, vast majority of those will become slaughtered, will be slaughtered. And some of the females, the surplus females, will also become slaughtered. So the genes, the carcass traits of that bull are being expressed. Then, of course, the bull also produces daughters who themselves will produce more daughters, but they'll also be mated to a terminal sire who will produce a carcass trait. So you can see the genes of this bull for carcass traits are flowing down here and they're flowing down here. In fact, the expression of the carcass traits is 75% that of the lactation trait. So it is a fair high expression rate because you're expressing proportionally on more animals and actually sooner. The ones down here, and I'll come to this one in a second though, remember, this is only 25% of the genes of the bull, right? And also, it's not for another 6.5 years. So we've heard a little bit today, maybe Paddy we can talk about this later. I don't know the answer, but definitely something to discuss. In the advent of sex semen, that's gone, right? That male carcass bit is gone, right? Now there is an assumption then that it's completely gone. No, it's not completely gone, because let's presume this is an alternative bull. Let's call it a spade a spade. Let's assume it's a Jersey bull. You still get half its genes there and half its genes there. So you still have a quarter of its genes being expressed. And just for the crack, what I did was I took out the beef component of the EBI, today's EBI of the bulls, re-ranked them, and a third of the top 25 bulls were Jersey. So a lot of people ask me, why are Jerseys not always on the top? Beef is one, why are they at the top in New Zealand, right? Beef is here, it's not in New Zealand, and also, of course, we've got a way bigger Holstein Friesian population to select from than the Jersey population, right? So there are reasons why things are not the way that sometimes you might expect them to be. The other important point, because it did come up earlier, Paddy, right? The other important point to make is that there is a notion there that, if you use a Jersey bull, the carcass is destroyed. Firstly, there's actually pretty little difference between the value of a 25% Jersey carcass onto an Angus versus a Holstein Friesian onto an Angus carcass. I have the data, I've shown it, I've published it, it's quite clear. It's only around €50 of a difference. Right? So there is, I think, also a bad name being given to a lot of things, which is, again, Paddy, is not supported by the data. The data is telling us very different to what the narrative often is. Okay? Moving quickly on to genetic merit. If you look up a bull, that's the top bull an EBI at the moment. This is kind of what it looks like. I'm not fully sure that everybody really knows what those numbers mean. So just bear with me for a minute, and maybe some of this is very simple to a lot of you, but what does plus 10 kgs in protein actually mean? If you have a cow, she's plus 10 kgs, what's your expectation? Well, we can work off the base cow. I know there's a few lads here that listen to me lecture in dairy business. I absolutely hate the base cow, by the way, but I'm just going to do it for the time being, is that the base cow protein yield for a first calver is 195 kgs. That's your protein value of 0. On the average herd, it's supposed to produce 195 kgs. She's plus 10 kgs in protein, so 2 times that, because she herself is expressing the genes. You'd expect her to yield 215 kgs as a first calver. And of course, we know that a mature cow will yield 22% more than that, so around 262 kilos of protein. That's your expectation in your average herd. But as I said, I hate all of that stuff. I hate the averages, because what I did was I pulled out all the milk recording herds in Ireland that had a fat plus protein kgs of plus 7.5 up to 12.5 kgs. So all these herds varied by just 5 kgs in genetic merit for fat plus protein. That's their actual phenotypic yield. So you could tell that guy there, he's on 600, or she is on 610 kilos of milk solids, that if he or she was to use a bull that has plus 13 kgs, they'll increase their yield, and would do exactly the same for that one. So you can't actually know by looking at that data, you can't know by looking at the base cow as to what bulls are actually suitable for your system. The only way you can do it is through herd plus. Now, if you are from Cavan, I'm not sure if there's anybody from Cavan here, you can kind of guess it by looking at what the ancestry that you used over the past few years and just average the team of bulls that you've been using. And that kind of gives you a pretty good estimate of the genetic merit. But I would recommend you just spend a few euros and get the herd plus, because this is what you get. This is the average genetic merit of your herd. Right? I'll just focus on these ones. And this is the actual production. And it comes back, Paddy, to some of the stuff that was asked there of Mike Birmingham and Barry was, like, I think they were happy with the solids where they are. So if you look at this, and if you're happy with your 470 kgs of milk solids, and your genetics for fat and protein is 11.3 and 7.0, that's your target. That's where you need to go. So you can't make any breeding decisions without having these two things in front of you and then having your plan. And just a slight diversion, again, because it's a question I often comes up to me, is the whole issue of maintenance subindex. What's a good maintenance subindex? My answer, albeit as Aidan Brennan told me, is unscientific, but I think it's an answer that nobody can disagree with. Find the 10 to 15 to 20 cows in your herd that you just like the size of. Get their maintenance subindex. That's where you want your herd to be, right? Okay, it's not scientific, but everybody has a preference, big, small, and different cows. Get the 10 to 15 mature cows that you just like their weight, you like the size of them, get the average maintenance subindex of them. That's where you want your herd to be. Look at your herd. So if you want your herd, if those cows are 20, your herd is 10, you need to use bulls that are 30, or at least are greater than 20, and they will bring you up to where you want to be. Okay. So then just to finish off with the new traits, and I've actually put up the dairy beef index here because what I'm talking about now is applicable to the dairy beef index as much as it is to the EBI. What's missing? Product quality and quantity. You might say, well, sure, we already have quality with fat and protein. We don't have the more granular measures of different saturated fatty acid concentrations, casein, for example, processability. Quantity, what about lactation profiles? Okay, Lawrence talked about the whole Glanbia thing is gone, but maybe not from latent, but getting a more flat profile potentially, or at least enabling or giving you the opportunity to select for a different profile. Efficiency, so feed efficiency, environmental efficiency, labour efficiency, health and disease. You've heard me say this before, health is going to be the new fertility. The fertility of our herd is improving. Our cows are getting older, with the exception of Paddy here, everybody in hospital getting hip replacements and the likes are old people. And that's where our herd is going. Our herd are getting older and older. So health is naturally going to become the next biggest limiting factor to realising our profit potential. Labour, and again, Paddy will open up for discussions afterwards. So if you're to consider a trait, what are the 3 criteria? Well, it must be important. Most things are important, economically, traditionally, but maybe we need to talk more about socially, environmental importance. Is there genetic differences, and can we measure the thing? So let's focus on the second 2. This is just going into showing every single trait has genetic variation. I challenge any of you, and I've been doing this for many, many years in many different countries. Tell me a trait that is not under genetic control. Every single trait is under genetic control. Remember when people told us that fertility, sure, it's only 2 or 3% genetic, sure, you can't do much with it. You destroyed it genetically, by the way, but sure, you can't improve it. And look at what we did. So if it's a tiny percent of it is genetic, we can still change it as long as there's genetic variability. And what I'm showing you here, this is the saturated fatty acid concentration of the next generation herd, the casein concentration, and this is the methane emissions. Look at the variability, massive variability. So we just need to be able to find the animals in the different sides of the distribution. If we look at the next generation herd data, so the blue there is the national average versus the elite, we can see with the exception of probably casein, we are increasing the casein content of our milk. We're not doing anything in saturated fat. We're really not doing anything in methane. So you could look at that and say, oh, this isn't good. I look at that and say, geez, this is brilliant. If we have a breeding program for this, we can actually drive it in the right direction. Just for completeness, I then threw up the jerseys. Again, you'd expect this. Jerseys are a smaller animal, so they will eat less, so they will produce less methane. Okay. What are the costs? It's not cheap. So if we're to measure detailed, granular measures of milk composition, you're talking 50 to 100 euros. Methane, just out of interest, costs around 530 euros to measure methane emissions for a cow. Around 500 euros, this is from Michael Donovan, to measure feed intake across lactation for an individual cow, and meat eating quality is around 100 euros. Can we use alternative techniques like infrared spectroscopy? Maybe we can, maybe we can't. But we still have to generate the data. So then finally, what's coming down the line, 3 things. And I'm quickly going to go through these individually. First is the carbon index. This is what the EBI looks like. I showed you kind of this already before. This is the economic value times the genetic merit for milk. The economic value for protein times the genetic merit for protein. So the new carbon index, very simple. You just change the word economic with the carbon cost. Right? And then you can just sum them all up and you can produce a EBI for carbon efficiency. Right? So it's the extra carbon that is required to produce an extra kilo of milk. And then you can put in a carbon cost of €6 a tonne, 160 euro a tonne, whatever you like. These are the actual values, by the way. Lawrence derived these. These are our economic values. Look at this. If you stand back from it and you think, okay, what's the sign? Well, milk, fat and protein, the more you produce, the more the cow has to eat, so therefore the more carbon it will produce. So it's bad. That's what it says, right? They're producing more. If you lengthen your calving interval, it's bad. If you reduce or if you improve your survival, it's good because you're diluting that heifer carbon across more and more lactations. What's the impact? The good news is that this is the EBI in the bottom today. This is the carbon index that I just talked about. The line is in the right direction. The carbon index at the moment is actually, or the EBI at the moment is improving the carbon efficiency of our animals. So that's a really good positive. What happens when we join the two of them together, and this is what we would be proposing to the ICBF board, we would make a new EBI, which has the carbon component inside in it. What I'm showing you here is the current EBI in the bottom of active sires, and this is the vertical. We do see a little bit of re-ranking, correlation of 0.95. So there will be some re-ranking, but it will be a more efficient index. How could it look? It could look like this. Again, it's not my decision. This is a decision for the ICBF. Is you currently look at individual bulls and you see all their indexes. You could just see at the bottom a new carbon index, just something like that, okay, to enable you to select more carbon efficient animals. What this doesn't capture, of course, is what we call residual methane. And just look at this for an example. On the bottom there we have milk yield, and on the vertical we have production, or methane production. What you can see, and this is reality, is that for the same milk yield you have some cows producing around 270 grams of methane, and for exactly the same milk yield you have cows producing twice that. So the question is, well, what is this variability, and is it worth chasing? And this is where you have to do the expensive measures of measuring methane on the individual animals. So the carbon index is not capturing that. It's not capturing the variability in methane per animal. Next one, I'm almost finished, is the fertility evaluation. So I showed you at the very start, I highlighted in particular that fertility was suboptimal, the gains we were achieving. Why? Okay, so let's take an example. Here we have the months of the year. This is the plan started calving here, and this is the plan started mating. So let's just take two cows. Let's take cow A. She calved, what's that, the 22nd of January, just after the start of the calving season, right? She expressed estrus in March. Breeding season hadn't started, so she wasn't bulled. She was in heat again, twice more. She's not going to be bulled until the start of the breeding season, so she was served on the 9th of May. So there's a fair long distance there, voluntary waiting period, especially from when she calved to when she was actually bred. And that's going to give her a long calving interval. What if we take another cow? She calved in the middle of March, and now she was bulling on the 24th for the very first time on the 24th, just a few days after the start of the breeding season. She actually has a short calving interval. Now, statistically, we were accounting for this, but what we want to do now is subtract this voluntary waiting period. Essentially, we're saying the cow, she couldn't have been bulled, so therefore, why are we penalising her for calving earlier? Right. So that is the new fertility evaluations. The hope would be to try and get them in this year, but it's not sure as to whether that will actually happen, but it is certainly the intentions. The last one is age of slaughter. It's my second last slide, I think, or third last slide maybe. It's a bit of a no-brainer. I missed a bit of Lawrence's talk, but I'd be surprised if he didn't talk about it, is that if we can, in red line, if we can get our animals to get to the ideal carcass weight a bit younger, off grass, and that's key. We know we can do it. We just don't castrate them, right? And we can pump them with nuts. But if we can get them to finish earlier off of grass, that's going to be good economically and environmentally. And just to show you some of the data, you probably can't see the individual colours, but all of these are distributions of breeds. These are animals that were slaughtered or can be slaughtered earlier, so they hit a good fat score and carcass weight earlier. No surprises there. They're your Anguses and your Herefords, your early maturing breeds. These are your later maturing breeds, including the Holstein up here as well. So what I haven't talked about, Paddy, is the entire system, and we can talk about, but I think it is important to differentiate between the EBI and the entire system. A comment came up from Lawrence. I did hear him talking about the dairy beef index. Like, the dairy beef index to me is perfect. It's the system behind it. We saw that with the EBI. Remember I showed you that the EBI didn't really change for the past 20 years. Yeah, if you go back to 2003, Coach and Currier was the #1 bull, who was something like +7 in calving interval and plus 1,000 in milk kgs or something like that. EBI is still the same. It's just a breeding program, and the buy-in by farmers made it happen. So, Paddy, take-home message: the EBI certainly does work, and it is robust, but it'll never be perfect for everybody. I don't think we should ever say that it ever will be. So, thank you.
I wouldn't like to see my health sub-index at the moment anyway, Donagh, thanks for that. So I might invite up, please, Peter and Robert, and just while the lads are taken to the stage, Donagh, maybe a quick question, and the lads might try and get a mic to you there. With carbon, Donagh, there in the carbon index, extra milk was not actually a good thing because they were eating more. So you might naturally think a higher producing cow is going to dilute her carbon footprint, but is that actually not the case?
Yeah, so this is a common misperception that I addressed actually at the Positive Farmers a few years ago, is there's 3 ways to increase milk, and you know this, right? One is the genetics for milk, which you're alluding to, right? Cows that are genetically predisposed to produce more milk per day will eat more, all else being equal, per day. But of course, if we lengthen the lactation by having better fertility, right? So our median lactation length is around 279 days. We're losing around 4% yield per lactation there by not going to 3 or 5 days. And the other one, Paddy, is the survival, longevity. Mature cow yields 22% more than a first lactation cow. So by actually improving fertility and survival, which the carbon index is doing, we're actually increasing lifetime performance yield.
So chasing milk in itself is not the answer, but fertility via production via fertility.
At the end of it, it's profit,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it is a combination of longevity and really, it's so difficult to do, but I think we really need to start thinking about lifetime performance or lifetime profit as opposed to per lactation performance.
Super, perfect. So delighted to be joined by Peter and Robert. I might just, by means of introducing the 2 lads. So Robert's farming with his wife Mary in Cork. He's a previous speaker and chair of the Positive Farmers, so thanks for being so flexible and moving from chair to panellist today, Robert. Some people might know Robert's brother Bertie, who's involved in Grassic. I'm sure there's lots of clients here. But I suppose the main reason Robert's here and why we was chosen as a chair, he's one of the top EBI herds in the country, which I'll let him speak about. It's a Springhaven herd. There's a number of bulls he's bred that are in AI, and it's fantastic to see bulls coming now from commercial herds into AI being used around the country. And also joined by Peter Farrell from Mead. Peter's farming with his fiancée Ciara there over 2 units. He's an Nuffield scholar, and we're delighted to be joined by him today. So what we might do, I'll get each of the lads kind of introduce themselves, and you get a feel for their backgrounds, their breeding policies, how are they approaching genetic gain. We will have a panel discussion then, and I'll open it up to the floor. So maybe Robert, would you start off? Just maybe give us a feel for kind of the journey of the farm over your, I suppose, career to date very briefly, and then talk to us about production system today, what kind of KPIs you're looking for, and how you're going after it.
Okay, thanks, Paddy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I farm with my wife, with Mary, in a place called Newton-Chandrum, which is halfway between Cork and Limerick, for those who geography mightn't be great. But we're milking 450 Frisian cows. Average EBI is 192. That's broken down into a fertility sub-index of 88, with a milk sub-index of 61, a calving sub-index of 38, average maintenance of 16, and the management and health sub-indexes then of 2 and 3. We're calving on the first week of February. So we're spring calving, cows go to grass straight away, and touch wood, if the weather's anyway normal, we can stay out day and night until the cows come in again on the 1st of December when we dry off. So we milk off of grass, we dry off of grass, and we take 2 months off in the winter, and average production per cow is about 470 kilos of milk solids. For Frisians, it's around 455 fat and 360 to 70 protein. So for a Frisian herd, it's probably reasonable figures. And I suppose over the past number of years, we breed bulls to sell to other farmers. And if a bull comes up on a high EBI, we sell to the eye stations, and we're happy to be part of that. And we feel there's a reward for probably putting in a bit of effort into identifying bulls to mate with certain cows and get a high EBI calf on the ground. So yeah, as Donagh said, we use sire selection, so we plan mate all the cows, and we do the best we can that way.
Super. And what kind of fertility KPIs are you hitting, Robert, and cow size as well? What would you be coming in around?
So, I mean, average fertility for the herd is 88, but I suppose we're targeting about 100, because I suppose the bar has always been getting higher, so you kind of got to follow that. And so you would select. It's not our main trait anymore, I suppose. I mean, go back 20 years ago, while we didn't have a fertility issue, we always selected on fertility because it's a high percentage of the EBI anyway. And so...
what kind of empty rates are you in 6-week calving?
Yeah, well, 6 weeks calving rate is 88% for the last couple of years. Empty rate will be under 10%. Super. So, but that's where we need to be. We feel if we're under 10%, there's plenty of scope in the herd then to cut out the poor performing cows and go from there.
Super. And in terms of genetic gain, Robert, what kind of bulls will say? How would you describe your strategy of breeding that next generation?
We're 90% genomic bulls, 10% probably proven bulls, and the only proven bull we use is on the heifers. So we AI all the in-calf or the bulling heifers. We synchronize them in the first week of May, and we tend to use a proven bull there in the sense that we want to guarantee easy calving, and. But after that is genomics, and we're happy. We're using genomics probably for the last 10 years. And I mean, science will bear through to me and that. I mean, if they're ahead of the curve, yes, not all of them are going to be ahead of the curve, but you're going to have a higher percentage. But you don't select one bull. We're using probably 14 different bulls across the herd. So we're minimizing the risk. And our rate of genetic gain is improving.
How does that work practically using 14 bulls across the herd, Robert?
Very simple. I mean, you do SAR advice, and you print out all the cows, and you say these are the parameters. If a cow is low on fertility, she needs a high fertility bull. If she's low on solids, we breed her to an Angus bull. So I suppose there's a phrase going out there, and Noel Gowan would have used it in the last year. There's herd builders and herd cripplers. So we try and target the herd builders from now on, because our herd, we're static in the sense our expansion phase is leveled, and so the poorer performing cows, and that means even if they're in the first 3 weeks of breeding, they get an Angus bull, and but we still
it's good to hear even a top herd in the country, you're looking to filter out those cows that you don't feel are...
Yes, but we still feel we get enough heifer calves, and we sell surplus heifer calves every year, or sell bulling in calf heifers. But certainly the lower in the herd, which everyone gets in their EBI report, there's no need to target them.
Yeah. Super, excellent. So black and white herd, like one of the top EBI herds in the country. Genomics is kind of the strategy, good physical performance. So we have a bit of contrast then, Peter, for you to bring to us. So again, maybe you just introduce yourself, give us a bit of background to the farming business, and then talk a bit about breeding.
So we're home farming probably about 12 years now. When I went home first, we were a liquid milk herd, Holsteins. Typical of our area, nearly everyone had liquid milk contracts, split calving. Fairly large Holsteins. They were small. We thought they were small, but then when you compared them against other cows, they started to look big. So probably 600, 650 kilos, feeding about a ton and a half a meal. Now, look, we were a very high RBI herd back in the day, so production was good. But since then, and since quotas have gone, we've gone 100% spring calving. We're crossbreeding full time for the last 5 years now. So we've got first, second, third lactation, all crossbreds. We're down to our maintenance sub-index finger is about 25 kilos, so we're down to about 525, 550 of a herd average. Now there's still a large variation in the herd, but we're down to probably that figure roughly, feeding about 700 to 800 kgs a meal now, and this year we should sell about 525 kilos of solids. Wow. And we're still crossbreeding, so like it's fairly basic. It's Jersey and black and white and Jersey, and a few Norwegian reds in between.
And mostly with what proven bulls is more you've gone towards?
Yeah, I'm complete opposite. I remember when genomic bulls just used to be called test bulls, and they charge you €7. Now they call them G1 bulls and charge you €18. So no, we're all proven. We did use genomics. Now we probably didn't use it right. We didn't use evenly and spread across the way it should have been done. But we found, look, we had a big jump to make to get to the cow that we wanted for our system. We had to go from 650 kilos, 7,000 or 8,000 litres, down to 6,000 litres and 500 kgs. So there was no way we could do it with genomic bulls with the variation, because we'd end up with a varied herd. We felt we had to use proven bulls to know exactly what was going to come out of the cow. Yeah. And crossbreeding was the quickest way to do that. So it's all proven.
I suppose if you're using Jersey bulls, they tend to be proven more than...
Well, we pick our Jersey bulls from New Zealand and off the RAS list, so they're all proven, or they have at least a milk proof. And yeah, we proven Jersey bulls, and we're using proven either high EBI bulls or high BW bulls from New Zealand.
Super. And fertility then, and maybe percentages?
Yeah, so look, we're getting the hybrid vigor, it's coming through. So we've gone from maybe, I wouldn't even say what our figure was back in 2009, but it wasn't great now, 6 week in calf rate. But we're up probably about 75 to 8% 6 week in calf rate. Run about 10%, we were 8% empty last year. And then it's improving every year. Like our first, second lactation animals are all 85% 6 week in calf rate plus. But that's probably the hybrid vigor coming through.
So 85% in calf in 6 weeks.
Yeah,
so
for the first, second lactations. Yeah, like this, I was saying to you the other day on the phone, like the last 2 years has been, the difference has been huge. Like our first, second lactation animals, 1 and 2% empty after 10 weeks. It's just been huge. The gains we've made with the crossbreeding has been huge.
Yeah, I'm sure they've been managed very well, but yeah, no, excellent.
I don't manage the herd, so I can't take credit for that.
Excellent. And so maybe both to two of to Robert and Peter, and again we'll have maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll go to the crowd for questions. But just like Donagh outlined, the EBI and what it's done, and I think there's not too many would argue the value it's delivered to the industry. And so where do you feel kind of going forward? What kind of targets are you hoping to achieve on the farm? Maybe Robert, I'd come back to you. Like in terms of maybe live weight, like Donagh was saying, what's your ideal live weight? Where do you see production going?
Yeah, well, I suppose every one of us wants more kilos of milk solids for the same input at the end of the day. But what we have to remember is we want a cow that'll go out to graze grass probably the first week of February, depending on or where you are in the country, might be a bit later. I mean, you want her to go back in calf the first week of February or May, and then come September, you want her to look after herself, that she gets ready for the next year. So, I mean, that's our ideal type of cow. But she needs good conformation to walk and eat the grass. She needs good teeth placement and conformation to be in the parlour. She needs to be robust, durable cow for the weather, depending on the way it comes, and kick back. So that's the type of cow we want. And for us, I'd agree with what Donagh said. Our ideal cow is probably 540, 550 kilos live weight, and they're a solid square cow, and they're easy maintained. So I don't think we'll be changing from that. But to get there, we'll just have to follow the way the EBI goes. And when we're selecting a bull, we'll automatically go into I suppose, the individual traits of those bulls to select. Like, we won't pick a bull that's above average in stature, because if he's above average in stature, it means he's higher in weight. Milking speed is an important one, so we won't pick a bull that's slow in milking speed. So we've only to look at a number of those traits within the blend of the EBI, and that formulates our decision where we're going.
You sound like me, Robert, a man with attention to detail when it comes to bulls. I was last year with myself and my wife doing a bit of strategic planning about our own farming business, and I asked her, what's your least favourite part of our farming business? And we're running multiple farms, different things. I thought she'd say the stress and hassle, and she said, my least favourite part of the whole thing is when you're picking bulls. Because she said, when you're picking bulls, you're picking them on the iCatalogue, you're scrolling through your phone picking up bulls, you're on your laptop picking up bulls. It sounds like you're putting that kind of attention to detail.
But I suppose this information is out there. Only unfortunately we have to go in and probably pick it when it gets closer to the time.
Well, what do you, sorry, do you want to...
Can I just give you a quick stat, because you know how I like statistics. So some of you might have heard this one before, right? So we accept that genetics has contributed around half the gains in performance, right? Breeding. Yet, if we were to assume that you work a 9 to 5 day, 5 days a week, Paddy, and you spend one whole day with Amy picking bulls, right? You spend 0.4% of your time on something that contributes half of your profit. Now, I don't think you spend a whole day picking bulls, and I don't think you work just 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So pushing the effort into exactly what Robert said, to me, active bull list, forget about EBI. Pick off the active bull list. Rather than pick, you remove. That would be my advice. You just say, I don't like those bulls, I don't like those bulls. What you'll end up doing is picking your 14 bulls from 20 as opposed to picking your 14 bulls from 100. And they're all high EBI, right? So to me, it's a very simple solution.
And Donagh, do we know, in terms of picking bulls, what that ideal cow for the future is going to be? And we're hearing stuff today will we be able to feed grain to cows in 10 years' time, depending on where food security goes? And at the moment, I would say a lot of the bulls, there's huge milk in milk sub-indexes in bulls, and is there a danger that we could end up with too milky a cow in the future?
Yeah, I don't know which one of the lads had a comment. I think you said, Robert, that we want more milk, and I'm actually sure about that. I actually think we probably do have enough milk in our animals, right? And now it's a matter of, because if we put more milk into them, we're going to stress them a little bit more, and Lawrence's creep is going to, system is just, more solids. But I'm not sure if we do want more solids. Like, I don't know, can't remember what you said you were at. 510, was it?
470. Yeah.
Oh, 470. Okay, maybe you want to go up a little bit more, but I think a lot of us have enough solids for our particular system. I think Barry talked about it, that he was happy with where he is. And I think there should be no fear in us saying, do you know what? I don't want any more milk solids. Do you know?
Yeah. I think it's a very important point, like, because it's the sexy one. Do you know, everyone would love to have cows milking more. But I suppose there's a real, kind of, I think what we've been reminded of, especially with the stocking rate thing as well, is, you know, we should be breeding for a profitable system, and that involves low cost of production. And if we're breeding for cows that just require more, will more supplement go in, cost of production, system creep. So it could happen from a genetics point of view. And Peter, your kind of future targets that you're kind of aiming for, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, so we would have, like, probably, we would hope to get to 4 protein and 5 butterfat in the next couple of years. We're probably 2 years. So I would slightly disagree with Donagh, though. That's a very dangerous thing to try and do.
Go on what?
But like, there's like, what was the national average solids like 10 years ago, with relatively the same inputs or even more inputs. So there's always room for genetic gain. So we be like, we're now targeting. We don't bring through any heifers that are less than 4 protein or 5 butterfat. So now we're picking bulls that are going to get us to 4.5 protein, or as close to that as possible. So like, you're getting down to small bull numbers, and higher fat. So we're just always trying to push and keep the kilos of milk at 0 or slightly negative. That's where we're going, and obviously keeping the live weight the same, fertility taking over as well.
And Peter, what are your reservations? So, like, I mean, we can see here 2 very impressive performance levels on farm, 2 people with very good attention to detail. What are your reservations about the genomics, we'll say, and using that to try and breed that cow of the future?
Well, one, from just a practical point of view, if I tell him, hey, man, I've got 14 different bulls putting 14 different cows in the morning, he just turn around and walk back out. He puts 4 straws down his back, and whatever one goes into the cow. So like, we use 6 bulls in the breeding season just to keep it straightforward. And then apart from that, it's just, I see a lot of bulls coming through in AI catalogues, and there's not even a picture of the dam. It's the second cousin or the half sister. I mean, you're very in danger of getting catfished by what's going to actually come out. So no, that would be my 2 main concerns. One is there's bulls coming through in genomics that they're from genomic bulls of genomic bulls, with dams with no great proofs longevity behind them, and just the practicality of using so many bulls on a daily basis.
And Donagh, remind us of how much of when someone looks at the EBI of a bull, how much of that is their genomic figure, and the use, maybe just address that, genomic bulls from genomic bulls being used. Is that standard practice across the industry and we should accept it, or is it something we need to be cautious of?
See, I can't let Peter get away with disagreeing with me first. I have to disagree with him on one thing that he said earlier, is the variability. The practicality thing, I don't know, and maybe Robert, you can counter the practicality. I'd say you're paying the EI man enough, you can do it, right? But there is a notion that the variability of genomic bulls, the variability in your herd, will be too large. That's complete and utter rubbish, right? I'll come back to you with a statistic using human height. 80% of our height, right, is due to our genetics. The difference between all of us is around 7 centimeters. The difference between you and your family is 5.4 centimeters. So the sire and the parents actually have a tiny little influence on the actual variability. Do you have a sister, Peter? Do you know
Easy now, done it, Jesus.
Do you know you could actually be unrelated to your sister? Completely, don't try this at home, anybody from Leitrim, right? But you could mate with your sister and result in no inbreeding, right? Actually, because the distribution of the jerseys is very different to the distributions of the Holsteins, you end up with way more variability from crossbreeding than you do from using genomics. I actually presented this. You need to go back and look at my Positive Farmers from around a few years ago. I presented exactly this, is that I think it's a 1% increase in variation of the performance of an animal by using 20 bulls versus using 1 bull. Right. Now, what was the question? Yes.
Genomics.
Genomics
on genomics. So there was a lot of reliance on it, I suppose. So what percentage of the index comes from it, and how?
So it depends on the bull, right? So if the bull ancestry has a lot of progeny information and it's genotyped well, and it's the opposite of an outcross, whatever that actually is. It'll be a higher weighting, maybe 50-55% weighting. If it's an outcross, then it's like the Jerseys now wouldn't have much of an influence of genomics because they don't have a huge training population beside them. The problem with using genomics on genomics is the accumulation of error. Right, that if there is a bias in there, right, and even though I didn't show much of a bias, but you're accumulating that over time, and it takes 3 generations almost to self-correct it until the great-grandfather actually has an animal. But again, that should be accounted for in A, in the reliability of the animal, and B, in the sire advice. So we had to change the reliability, because what we did see was we recommended using 4 bulls. So lads put 99% of their cows in calf to 1 bull, and then use the other, so they could go to the discussion group and say that they use 4 bulls, or else they used the 4 bulls all from 1 sire. That 1 sire was just the unlucky one that plummeted, which they did, right? And then, of course, because he's the sire, the whole 4 of them plummeted, right? So it's not about numbers of animals, it's about using that team, and not about just numbers, it's about the family diversity of that team. But again, it's all inside in Herd Plus. It calculates, it looks at the ancestry, calculates the reliability of it. So even if you don't want to do the mating, at least put in the bulls and get the reliabilities of the team.
So it's just, the technology works, but if we use it wrong, it can really bite you, effectively, if you overuse. Yeah, super. I'll take any questions from the floor now, just people put a hand up. I have a few Roman mics, I've one down here. And just while the mic is getting over there, please, just keep your hand up there just so that people can find you with the mic. Donagh, you said kind of the next big thing is health. But like looking at your slide there, the health sub-index hasn't changed. It's about 4% of the EBI for the last 10 years. You know, how are we going to improve that?
Right, so you're not going to improve that, really, right? So why is it only 4%? Okay, if you have a mastitic case, if you have a bull that throws lame daughters, right? Those daughters are going to yield, that's because they're lame. They're going to be harder to go in calf, and they're going to be culled younger. So that bull's lameness effect is already captured in its milk genetics, its survival genetics, and its fertility genetics. So that weighting that you see in health is a deflated weighting, right? And it's purely the marginal cost of that health event over and above everything else that's in the EBI. Remember my definition of economic value? It's a change in profit per unit change in just that trait. How do we change it? Well, we can change it by having more data. So getting more accurate proofs for mastitis and health, but also having more health events recorded, right? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but it'll be very sparse as to the number of farmers, because I know, because I asked for the data yesterday, we have 60,000 records of health events, mastitis, and 60,000 or 70,000 lameness events going into the national database annually, which is very small, given the fact that it is this low heritability thing. It's just the same as fertility. You need loads of data to get accurate proofs. So more traits, we saw TB and liver fluke. Why do we bring those in? Why do we bring in liver fluke and TB? Because we had the data. Right, we can't bring in metabolic diseases. I won't ask you lads if you're recording them, milk fever, anything like that, because we just don't have the data.
How do we get it into the it sounds like the biggest trick we're missing is in it. Like, so how do we?
To the lads.
Are you submitting it, lads, or what? Like, what are your thoughts on trying to get more and really driving on that as an industry?
I'd agree. We must record the information, like whether it is through the milk recorder that'll come once a month, or maybe some targeted system to farmers to make it more easier to put in and spread the data around, because that's how we'll be able to pick more.
Perfect. I'll come. I had a question down here, and if anyone else has one.
Thanks. Yeah, Matt Pilkington, Dairy Farmer UK. We talked about sire selection for herd improvement. Where does sex semen sit, providing it goes in the right cows for genetic gain?
Perfect. So, Robert, I'll excuse you from this one because I know you're not actually using sex semen, because the bull calves are very valuable on your farm. Peter, maybe give your experience of sex and your thoughts on it with genetic gain, and Donagh, you can comment as well.
Yeah, so we're probably 3 years into using sex semen. This year we made the decision to go, any dairy straw that's used was 100% sexed. So half the herd are getting sexed semen and the other half are getting beef. So if you just go on the criteria, what can get sexed, which has to be fairly born in good condition and have cycled, you're just naturally selecting off your best cows.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Like, they'll nearly self-select themselves at that stage.
Are you looking at their EBIs as well, or can you afford to, you kind of have to prioritise?
We nearly look, when the calf comes out, we look at the EBI, and the ones we don't want, we'll sell. But like we'll end up with we should end up with about a 40% potential replacement rate, so we have plenty of room to pick the ones we want. But no, it gets too complicated, again, when it comes to AI, and when you've got so many cows there for the eye. If she's in good condition and she's born in February, she gets a sex draw, and then the rest get beef.
Super. I mean, that's like,
And
I know,
select afterwards then.
speaking to a few UK farmers before the conference, and it seemed to be a much higher uptake of sex semen and fully beef there, because I mean, I know the dairy beef thing came up earlier on, and really it's gold star practice in terms of reducing those dairy bull calves. So what kind of conception rates are you getting, Peter? Have you learned any lessons with it to date, or would you be happy?
Yeah, we're going from about 45% conception rate on the older Holsteins to about 60% in the first, second lactation crossbreds.
Right.
Again, but like having been February born and in good condition is the two main ones. I haven't drilled in any further than that, but yeah, that's the run of it. And it's hard to tell in between different bulls. I know one or two bulls can show very high conception rates or very poor conception rates, but the main criteria is if they're in good condition and they're cycling it, they should have it generally.
And have you heat detection collars on both farms to help with the identification of?
Just on one farm.
On one farm.
And the other farm is just tail paint, and we just
Right.
AM/PM rule is another one that we go by.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so you're managing to do it on both farms, not necessarily
Yeah.
the
The
technology
collars
driving it on both.
definitely do help to take a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah. Super, perfect. Any more questions? Silhouette here. Maybe just let's talk a bit about dairy beef then as well. You know, so your sex semen is allowing you to avoid those bull calves. So like, Donagh, do we know what the ideal type of animal we should be producing for dairy beef? Like, is early slaughter the most important thing to avoid that second winter? Does that mean lower carcass weight, or what? Like, what guide us a bit in terms of what we need to be doing for the beef farmer?
The most important thing, Paul, is to get a live calf. Right, so you can have all, like, if the idea of producing a good carcass for the dairy farmers, or beef farmers, we should be using all Charlies. Right, the most important thing is probably gestation length, easy calving, and then good calf survival. Like, there's a reason why the conformation of the national dairy herd is declining, is because even though we have a positive value on it, the value of beef is far less than the value of milk. Right? So if you're selecting a dairy beef bull, you don't want to take that much, you know this, you don't want to take that much out of the cow. So the number one criteria is that. The next one, and this is, I think, where I'm a beef farmer, so I can mock myself, but I think this is where a serious educational issue for the beef farmer is that it's not necessarily about weight, it's about money. And like, just go back to Peter's point, like of 15, 20 years ago, RBI was all about output. And it was cool to go down to the pub and say how much you're producing. Now it's all about profit. And I don't think we're getting there from a beef perspective. So it's about age at slaughter. Everybody's talking about from a grass-based system, that's the key thing, right? And then it's about the good conformation, the good value of it.
And within that, so we have the dairy beef index. It's just about, I suppose, looking at both sides of the index. And that, will you comment on the new index that'll guide us on the terminal values as well? Yeah,
right. So just because you talked about marrying the two of them, right? The relationship between the let's call it the dairy part and the beef part is around -0.5, right? And you'll say, well, you'll never get an easy calving short gestation bull with good carcass characteristics. But so the same argument was put to me 20 years ago about milk and fertility. They also had an unfavourable relationship of 0.5. It took us around 5 years with the EBI to get those bulls to the top of the list that weren't there just because they had all calving or just because they had all beef. It's because they had a combination of both, right? So what I really like about our dairy beef, and there was a little talk about integration earlier on, right, is we have a new index, the dairy beef index. That is for beef breeders to breed the next generation of AI bulls for the dairy herd. It's for the Robertson Peters of the world to identify those bulls, AI or natural mating, whatever, right, bulls to use on their dairy females, not just cows, dairy females. They put it into sire advice. That does all the mating. So what the sire advice does is it looks at the cow, essentially. So her calving her genes for calving difficulty, her genes for producing a big calf versus her genes for a big pelvis. If she is producing a big calf, but she has a big pelvis, she can take a big bull, right? So it does that particular mating. It's really good at doing that. Then when the calf is produced, we have a new index, which is the commercial beef value, which is then to go up on the mart boards, which throws out the calving because the calf is there, right? So I'm a beef farmer going into the mart. I don't care if it was difficult calving or if it was 284 days gestation. I want to know the carcass and feed efficiency credentials and age of slaughter of that particular animal. Takes breed out of the whole equation and everything. So what you're really looking at, if you could superimpose a genotype on top of that, you have an accurate reflection of the profit of that animal as a beef animal. And then you know I hate breeds. You forget about breeds then. It's just about that value. And look at what we did with EBI. Took us a while, but now farmers are buying on EBI. You're selling on EBI, potentially. Right? A bit on luck, but I think it could be revolutionary. And it's about then demonstrating, which we have, that commercial beef value translates to more profit.
Perfect. Have another question here.
This is a question for Robert. we use 100%. We use 100% sexed dairy on all our cows. You use 100% not sexed. Would there be any concern about not having good enough bulls available for you with the sex semen? And then second question, just out of interest, how do you pick what percentage of your low producers? What's the percentage of low producers is your cut off? And are there any other traits that you use that you don't breed off?
Okay, thanks, Aid. So the first part of your question is on sex. Like, yeah, I mean, we will probably use sex going down the road, but I suppose at the current point there isn't a very high number of genotyped bulls available sexed. It's improving every year, and I would imagine it will get better. So when that comes on stream, I would imagine we will move more down that road. The cut-off then, like, I mean, if we see a cow that's, say, poor condition or sickled in her legs, I mean, we'll give her a beef straw, even if she's producing probably good kilos of solids. Like, you know, we look at her functionality in the parlour and on the roadway coming in, and you know, you'll trim accordingly to that and try and breed a proper replacement going forward, because they are handed down like those traits. You know, if a cow is tall in stature and you cross her with a bull that's tall in stature, I mean, you're going to get a calf that's tall in stature. But you know, if she's sickled in her legs or if her legs are turned out, there's a high chance that the next generation will have a percentage of that as well. So we try to watch those parts of the confirmation as well. Like.
Super. Any other questions? Donagh, maybe again, could you, we have a question down the back here, and perfect, we have two questions. Yeah, I'll take this one here as close, so yeah, straight away.
Mark Reed, dairy farmer in Dorset. Is there a risk of slowing down genetic gain with sex semen because the top bulls are not available, going through the sex process at the moment?
Do you want to comment on that, Donagh David?
I was going to comment about it earlier as well. Is sex semen? The question came about the impact of sex semen and stuff. And to me, it was like the argument about crossbreeding 10 to 15 years ago, which drove me bonkers. Was you have to crossbreed, but there's so much variability in there. So just saying sex semen is a solution without saying genetically elite sex bulls is the solution. And that's key. And I think looking at, I don't know the actual numbers, but we now have a sex semen lab in Ireland, and I think most of the good bulls now have actually gone in there. Lads, you can probably correct me, but there are some really good high-index sex bulls. But that's key. It's not sex semen, like it wasn't Jersey. It was good Jersey or good sex semen, and that's key.
I think that's a great point with both sex semen and breed, as you're saying, like that it's the genetic merit involved. I have a question below and then one up here.
Yeah, Kevin Toomey. Donagh and maybe the lads, in terms of the TB index, like where is it at? There's bulls in there. I don't believe farmers are looking at it really, because it's hard to find sometimes. Is it being used, and are there certain bulls that should not be in AI because just alone on that index? And just a second question, Donagh. Okay, the EBI is delivering, there's no question, no doubt, but is it delivering enough? You know, we're a compact, seasonal-based system. Like, do we really have enough fertility in the herd? Should we not be targeting just a 6-week breeding season and expecting 4 or 5% empty rates? Because of the efficiencies and all the efficiencies that come around, longer lactations, more lactations, you know, so are we missing a trick on that? Thanks.
Yeah, so Kevin, so for those people that don't know, around 14% of the genetic or the predisposition to TB is due to genetics. And the example I always use is those of you that have gone down with TB, did your whole herd get TB? Even though the fact that they were mixing with each other twice a day going in for milking, and it spread kind of in that kind of aerosol way. So there is a genetic predisposition. The evaluations are there, and Kevin, I'd actually fully agree with you. One of the local lads was looking for them. I found it difficult to get the TB evaluations. Maybe Andrew might comment on them later. We're looking at driving getting economic values for them to put them into the index. There are some shockingly bad bulls up there, and I would argue the first step would be to actually, at an AI station level, is to not go for bad TB bulls. Second question about the EBI, and again, it comes back to my previous point, Kevin, because look, horses for courses, the active bull list is there, 100 bulls, there's some of them there that are, there's a 200 on fertility sub-index, some of them that are lower. It's your prerogative. If you want to aggressively go after fertility, then you're more than welcome to do it, or the data is available, or the bulls are available for you to do it. If you put more emphasis on something, you have to take emphasis away from other things, and that is the problem.
And maybe actually I'll throw both to Andrew, because we have Andrew Cromie from ICBF here, because Donagh mentioned about changes to the fertility sub-index as well, so maybe you'd comment, there's obviously changes there that are going to make the model more accurate, so when can we expect to see that? And you might talk about the TB index as well.
First of all, yeah, in terms of the TB, so as Donagh has alluded to, there's two ways we're looking at that. Obviously, it's at the breeding programme level. Our preference very much now is to move to put in an economic value on TB and to incorporate it directly within the EBA. So that's certainly something we'll be bringing forward to the TAG and the ACBF board, and the goal of that is before the end of this year.
End of this year. Yeah.
So the second one then is around the female fertility, and look, that's been a very significant piece of work that's coming towards the end of that now. Our goal is to have that also in by the end of the year, but there's still a significant piece of work to finish that out. Whether we'll get it over the line and through the TAG, through the board, is, we haven't made a call on that yet, but we'll certainly be in a position to make that call sort of September, October this year. So just 2 points there.
Yeah, both sound like they could deliver a huge amount of value to farmers. I have 2 questions here up the front then.
Yeah, just Niall Murphy, just a simple question for Donagh. So looking at both the New Zealand and the Irish industry, very similar industries, the driver is just to turn grazed grass into milk solids for export as cheaply as possible. Yet I can't get my head around why, if you look at the New Zealand AEL list, 29 of the top Jersey bulls in New Zealand, or 29 of the top bulls in New Zealand are Jersey, Ireland going in completely the opposite direction. You made a comment a while ago, everything can be explained, and if you took out the beef index, Ireland would be going strongly down the Jersey route also. Like our receipts, I think 5% of our receipts are related to beef, so it's pretty irrelevant to us. So could you comment on that one? Are you saying if farmers are focused on dairy profits, they need to be stripping out beef out of the EBI and looking at a different model, or what?
No, again, it's exactly the same. I know you can count it, Niall, as a cop-out, but the bulls are there available to you with whatever you want. And just on your particular point, around 5% of the emphasis on the EBI is beef, so it reflects exactly what you've actually said. So now, but it's a question to the wider group is, should beef be part of an index? If we take beef out of the index, do you know what happens? We slow down our rate of genetic gain in milk production. Because what the beef is doing is trying to keep the cow size up, and cow size is positively correlated with milk. So you'll actually slow down the rate, it's an interesting one, you'll slow down the rate of genetic gain in milk production by removing beef from the EBI. But look, I'm open for discussion.
More on the breed comment on it, which industry is going in the wrong direction?
I'd say we're probably both going in the right direction for our systems. Beef is largely irrelevant from a New Zealand situation, so they don't have an index. If you take beef out, the jerseys go up €50. Fact. Right? The question, that I don't know the answer, is that the right thing to do? New Zealand have decided that they're not going to do it. The correlation between the BW and the EBI is 0.76. A few years ago it was 0.67. The BW is coming closer and closer to the EBI every single year.
Yeah. So farmers here that are of the view that beef is pretty irrelevant to them, you're saying they need to make an adjustment?
If they want it, with sex semen, things like that, if you're using sex semen, you're going to get no male calves from that generation. But that generation itself will have calves 6.5 years' time with 25% of the genes of the bulls that they're actually using.
Excuse me, Paddy, could I maybe come in there?
Yeah, and I'll ask the 2 farmers to comment as well from their view on it. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, no, the one comment that I'd make on that one, Niall, is that, engaging significantly with the New Zealanders at the moment, beef is becoming increasingly important for them in that industry, particularly in the context of the dairy beef integration piece. As an industry, they've realised that if they're going to be able to continue to export milk as they want to, they have to seriously up their game around the sustainability piece. And these calves slaughtered is very much inconsistent with that. So all of the engagement we're getting with New Zealand now is about, well, you know, how do you build better dairy beef integration? Their challenge for them as a dairy industry is they have no data on which to start to try and identify what we're doing here, which is the bulls that'll give milk solids, give female fertility, and have a decent enough calf. It's not about having an exceptional calf. It's just a decent enough calf that you can get a rearer to take that calf and come back next year for the calf. And that's the sustainability piece.
Are you happy, lads, the two farmers give it? Like, are you happy to have beef in the EBI for maybe the reasons Andrew outlined, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, it comes back to maybe what Andrew says. I mean, we have beef farmers within the country who need animals to make an income, and we can't breed all our animals to female, so or to replacements. So we have to have an outlet for the surplus animals, because I mean, considering the question this morning, we have to be mindful of the optics out there, and I mean, you know, we have to have a saleable product, and why not add a bit of value if we can select those cows for those beef animals and give them an index to.
And Peter, how are you finding the beef offspring from maybe some of your crossbred stock?
Well, probably my father's better person to ask. At least he can go to the market with his head high rather than trying to give away calves. But yeah, it's more about, it's not like most dairy farmers, if they could get rid of calves to a good home at 1 day old, would do it. It's not about the monetary sales. It's more about the social license. That's where the more important part when it comes to beef sales off farm.
But via your, we'll say, sex semen and beef, then, like, you're managing to, you're finding homes for those calves, like.
Oh, like, if it's a beef calf, you'll always sell it. If it's a Jersey crossbred bull, it's hard to shift. And you're moving that to sex semen. Aidan, did you want to be the final question? So.
Thanks, Paddy. No, it's for Donagh. Sorry now for being a bit critical, but I think you've kind of oversimplified some of the recent critique around EBI or the breeding strategies maybe that's adapted. I think, correct me if I'm wrong now, but some of the data you used was more for all the bulls available, all genomic bulls, all stock bulls, all proven bulls, whereas a lot of my issue at least is with the actual bulls that are being used. So if you look at what actual bulls are going into cows at the moment, if you pick up the active bull list or AI catalogues, there are bulls there that are very high in milk kilos. The active bull list is, the average PD for milk kilos is double what the actual cows are today. And the maintenance of bulls in many of the catalogues are €5-6, you know. So there is an issue there, I think, that probably needs to address. And in the active bull list, 40 of the bulls are from only 2 sires, and there's many more there from far less. So I think there's a few issues that maybe weren't reflected fully in your presentation.
Yeah, and I'll come to the second point first. Doesn't worry me at all. You probably said the same thing to me, I'm sure, when you were in the journal around 7 or 8 years ago, when 23 of the top 25 bulls were from Oman, and the 24th one was Oman himself. Now where's Oman? Right? So the job of the AI stations and us, because we do a lot of the contract meetings, is where is the next generation from? I don't care if all the bulls at the top of the list come from exactly the same bull, as long as next year it's a different unrelated bull. That's not an issue. Yeah, look, what I'm looking at, your first question, is the system. As a scientist, I'm wondering, is the system right? Like, if I showed up calving interval, I couldn't because I didn't have enough data. That's where I hear most of the problems for. I think that probably is declining, but I didn't have the data to actually show it. I'm showing genotype bulls. They were all AI bulls, by the way, so they are all available. So it's you or whoever is making the decision to select those individual bulls from that subset. Now, I can go back and redo. Like, a point I probably didn't say was that we have all this data, right? So if there are questions out there, rather than going up on Twitter and saying, the whole thing isn't working, come to us. We look at the data, we look at that, look at the usage. We have the AI inseminations. We can do exactly the same work by the inseminations that are used, and maybe it'll show a different picture, but then the question, Aidan, is why? So there are bulls I showed you that had low PDs for milk. You're saying farmers used the high PDs for milk, so the question is why? They're all AI bulls.
I think maybe it's that production cell, Donagh, maybe is what Aidan is concerned about, like that we're selling the big milk bulls, which then we'll get big milk cows, which then, could drive
No. The data I showed was all AI bulls available. All AI bulls available. Somebody here is using the high milk bulls according to you. That's a different question. Like, because I had heard exactly what you said. The EI stations are all picking all the high milk bulls. That's not what the data is saying. The data is showing that it's slightly higher, but it's not double it.
That data is the actual usage of bulls, is it?
No, that's not the usage. That's his
the
point.
pigs.
I didn't do the usage.
Okay.
I did AI bulls available.
Might be
but
just
somebody
the ones
is.
that are,
But then, whose fault is that? The AI bulls are available. Somebody here is using, is purposely going out and using, and maybe you could rightly argue the AI stations are really good marketers, and they're marketing more those particular bulls. Well, okay, Aidan, we'll look at it. We'll look at it and we'll come back with actual data, yeah. And you might be right.
And I think maybe it's been a nice comment from you earlier, Donagh, that there's a danger of breeding for too much milk. And a lot of us at the moment, like I've 5 discussion groups, 75 farmers. There's farmers with 10 kilos, as you told, kilos of protein and fat and protein, 10 kilos, they're doing 550 kilos of solids, and yet they're breeding for cows that are going to do another 40, 50 kilos of solids. So I think it's a very, I'm delighted it came out actually that we
Paddy, if
we
I
talked
could
about
actually, I would agree with that sentiment that Donagh expressed there.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one message that I would urge people to take away here is the new things that Donagh was talking about there today, right? So if we want 500 kilograms of milk solids, maybe somebody wants 470 and somebody wants 5, but we'll just say 5. Effectively prepared to put that some sort of a ceiling on output. What do we want then? Well, we want less greenhouse gas emissions per cow, absolutely, for that given level of output. We don't have any data on it. We want the cow, Donagh says, to not get sick, mastitis, lameness, functionality, with limited data on it. And thirdly, we'll have a bit of a discussion about where dairy beef integration is in terms of, and that's a preference issue as to where people sit on that one. But that's a third. The first two, we don't have data. So I was having lunch with a farmer earlier on, and he was saying to me, geez, you must be quite just ticks away on ICBF, must be boring enough now. I mean, it's not at all. I mean, the future is 2 new traits which we really know very, very little about on the sorts of cows that we going to want to have for farmers in the future. That's very exciting.
Yeah, very. And look, I think we'll maybe finish it on that side. I know there was a question or two, but we're out of time, unfortunately. There's a break now in the next session. Go ahead. No, I think we'll. No, perfect. Look, we'll finish on that. Like I think it is, genetics is such an exciting thing, and for me, the phrase it's permanent and cumulative. So when we make genetic gain, we always have it. We build on it on the next generations. I think maybe some of the key points around the dangers of breeding for too much milk, haven't heard it said before. I think it's important that we acknowledge it. I think counteract that, we cannot have enough fertility in our herds from a carbon footprint point of view, from a profit point of view. There's some interesting new traits we talked about there, the carbon index coming. TB, definitely, I hope everyone is going to make the effort now to have a look at what TB status their bulls are. It was a great warning. And maybe, Andrew, to finish, I think we as farmers need to do more, and it would be great to see more pressure put on us to do more, you know, because I know we do need to get more animal health data into the index, but I'm not seeing the calls for it maybe enough either. So I think we all have a bit more work to do. So huge thanks to Peter, Robert and Donagh for a very interesting session. We have a maybe 25-minute break, and we're back at 4:30, I think, for the last session. Yeah.